So I got the Shiranui deck set this past weekend. Time for an updated deck profile. Let's get right into it. Check out Dueling Guard's deck boxes, playmats, and binders. The great quality products that are anime based. They continually have more anime options becoming available. Use the affiliated link in the description for a 5% discount on your next purchase. I think at this point everybody knows what Dominate does. Essentially we can use our opponent's rearguards against them and also dominate their vanguards to get additional drive checks too. So the deck wants to utilize the domination mechanic as best as it can, with the help with the crest as well, with power-ups and that such. The crest will also scale up with our front units in our own rearguard circles. So over time, it becomes even harder for the opponent to guard those attacks as well. So starting off with the right line, you want to play Midori for sure. The grade 1 that gives us the crest, Seisui, if that's how you pronounce it. But for the grade 2, I definitely recommend the Shoujo Doji grade 2. It actually solves two of the main problems the deck has. The first one is soul. So we could check the top 5 to actually add any stealth unit in the soul, but if you also see another one, you can call it to rearguard circle. So that takes care of the soul just like Genkai did. However, the second skill is what helps it even more to have an early game. Pretty much the entire Nubatama clan as a whole has stealth in the name, so you have multiple viable targets in this deck. Just having the extra body helps with having a better early game, so that way you can survive to the stride game. Because if you don't survive to the stride game or you're at 5 damage already, it's really hard for you to win games at that point too. This card will go in tandem with other cards such as like Aiza and Tenrei as well for that early game pressure, which I'll highlight once I cover those cards as well. Also with the grade 2 Shoujo Doji, there will be games where you decide to stay at grade 2 for another turn too, just depending if you want to win that first stride against another stride deck, or maybe slow down another deck that can take advantage of that turn 3 if you're already a grade 3 or greater, for example, too. So just having that early game helps a lot, even staying an additional turn on grade 2. And of course, you want to have your Oboro for your grade 3 ride target. With the crest, it forces you with the Demon Stealth Dragon, grade 3 or greater ride. And currently in D standard, this is the only option that we have. Maybe later on we get reprints like Zanki, or retrains, I should say. But keep in mind, whenever you do stride, you dominate and give it a 4K boost for that unit. But with the crest, you can give it an additional 5K and remove those abilities that are pesky, right? And it gets around those like domination rulings that we've had in prior G era, which can be a headache sometimes. The right phase skill is just as important too. So if you're already on this unit, the next following turn, you can revive something for your opponent's drop to rearguard circle. That helps you have a unit to dominate, essentially, if they have an empty board. Onto the rest of the main deck, we are playing 2 more of the Oboro copies. So a couple things. You want to have enough grade 3 so you can have discard fodder for the cost of stride. Remember, you need a summation of grade 3 to pay the cost of stride too. The other aspect is that Mukuro needs to have a Demon Stealth Dragon discard to be able to stride into it as well. At the earliest, Mukuro can be our second stride, but having extra copies just so you have that discard fodder will come up later in the mid to late game essentially for you. Typically, you don't have to ride another Shiranui on top of another one, but you can. The main reason that you want to do that is actually it generates soul, so always keep that in mind because of cards like Furai, Sekai, and then of course Esperiata if you do play it as well. This can come up on the Pure Light matchup too, where you're trying to empty your soul out before they do a Pure Light skill the following turn. And so that way the following turn you could just ride and also generate soul with your soul chargers as well to deal with that matchup too. 4 Peeling Dragons. So this card is relatively new, and so what I really like about this card is that it is a beater on your first stride turn too. So because you will flip something with Mangun Tembu, your crest will give you 5k, and this gets a 5k with its own effect. So it becomes 23k on its own, which hits great numbers over a trigger. It also has a retire aspect where you can get rid of units too slowly by dueling the resources. And it's really free. The only thing you had to have is either a grade 4 Vanguard or reveal a grade 4 from your hand to be able to do the skill, essentially. But you're on stride, so you'll always be on a grade 4, essentially. The second skill is just as important. So when it's discarded for the ride deck of a grade 3 or for the cost of stride, you get to draw a card, essentially. This helps you keep advantage, but also generate advantage that way too. And it's another great discard target, so it could be also good as a rearguard, but also just for discard fodder. Another alternative that you can play is the original Shiranui from the deck set too. If you can't afford these, because obviously these have spiked up with the demand too, that's another alternative. It's just as good, very small differences, and it's totally up to you at that point too. 1 copy of Forbidal and 1 copy of Esperidia. And so you want to be able to search for your Peeling Dragons, but ideally I wanted to play Forbidal to actually search for the Esperidia, but also revive it just in case it went to the damage zone or it went to, you have to guard it early on, discard fodder, all these kinds of things. And in a way you have access to a restander outside of Furai and Sekai. And so I'm playing 9 restanders essentially in the main deck. Furthermore, Nubatama takes advantage of deck thinning quite a bit throughout the turns too. So Forbidal actually takes 2 cards from your deck on top of what you're already doing. So that way your Makuro turns are just as scary because you're going to typically see the 5 to 6 drive checks depending on what you dominate. And then of course throughout the games, your damage checks and your drive checks are still going to be scary too because you're going to see more than likely triggers as well. Esperidia's importance will go up later on once a card called Bracing Angel Ladder comes out later on. That card essentially stops our domination effects to even go through, and then it makes those restanders that we rely on useless. So Esperiada is even more important once that comes about too. So definitely keep in mind as an option moving forward too. 4 copies of Furai. So this guy is a phenomenal restander. So it has a continuous effect where it gets 5k for each dominated unit attacked this turn. So this lets it that it sees, even if it wasn't called during that turn to see the dominated attack, it counts it as well. So this can easily scale to +10, +15, depending on the stride that you go into, in addition to the crest power up as well. So you could easily see this unit hitting 25k plus moving forward on your turns that you stride. And again, it has a restand skill and it uses a Soul Blast too. Also keep in mind that it's not once per turn, and the Dragon Empire OT does come up in this deck, especially on Makuro turns. So if it turns out really well, you can restand again and attack a 3rd time with this guy too as well. And his brother from another mother is Sekai. Very similar skill, he restands as well, but he only gets +10k in a draw if there are 2 or more face-up cards in the G zone. So typically on your first stride, you're not going to try to use this guy. You might want to save him for the next turn. So you could start capitalizing on recuperating some advantage at that point too. Again, he is not once per turn. If you see the Dragon Empire OT again, restand again. Assuming that you have the Soul Blast for that. So this grade 2, I want to spend some time. It's Aiza. So this is one of the Shoto Doji support as well, but it synergizes well on your grade 2 turn. So literally we play this card for the early game. And essentially when this is called to Rearguard Circle from anywhere, as long as you have that name Shoto Doji, you can Counterblast 1, check the top 5, and add a stealth normal unit to your hand. You're essentially +1ing in some form or fashion. This one will go to the hand instead of like the other grade 2 that costs a Rearguard essentially. This also searches other stealth units, again, which we have viable targets in this deck too. You got cards also such as Tenran that lets you draw. You can also grab the Stealth PG for you to have a very good defensive quality hand, depending on some matchups where you may want to get a PG as soon as possible. If you have the extra Counterblast, you could actually grab another copy of this guy and then just call the second one and then do it again as well to keep further +1ing at that point. And again, you're deck thinning too, so more than likely your drive checks and your damage checks are going to be seeing triggers as well. I've seen players play 3 to 4 copies. I recommend playing the 4, especially now that the main deck has 50 cards in general too. So you have the room pretty much, and so you can maximize on the consistency. This is a card that you can just easily mulligan for, and making sure you have at least 1 copy, or you did your best to mulligan. So that way when your grade 2 checks the top 5, you're more than likely to see at least 1 card of this. Worst case scenario, you see the grade 1. The other thing I want to mention, this card, I know if you didn't get a chance to get this card, the demand has been high for this card and it's overpriced at this point. So you can use other substitutes that I mentioned in my how to upgrade Shiranui video too. There's plenty of grade 2 options that you can use kind of like as a backup, or you can increase different ratios in the other like grade 3 or grade 1 lineups, for example, too. 4 copies of Tenrai. So this card is phenomenal because when it's placed, as long as you just have the crest, you can Counterblast 1 and draw a card. It's not generation break restricted. You don't have to worry about like domination effects or anything like that. Literally, it's just Counterblast, draw 1. So that's really big, especially in their early game, because this is a card you can call down as well early on as a booster or as an attacker, especially if they're a grade 1, for example, or if they call grade 1 rearguards, then you can attack those as well. This is also a stealth unit again, so it could be searched with Sojo Doji grade 2 when you ride it at that turn. And then the second skill, whenever it sees a dominated unit attack hit, this bounces back to hand, so you can reuse it again if you want to use another Counterblast to draw a card again later to the mid to late game essentially too. This card and alongside with Aiza has this deck be consistently surviving that early game, so again, we make it to the stride turns, which is big. Onto the soul charging aspect of the deck too, we're playing 4 copies of Forktail, so when it's placed, you can check the top 7 for a stealth normal unit and add it into your soul and then shuffle your deck. So this is super helpful because you need to have soul generated over time so your restanders can keep restanding essentially turn by turn basis, especially if you're using 2 of them per turn. And then Mokuro also eventually uses a Soul Blast, so you could be typically using 2 to 3 Soul Blasts moving forward at that point too. You can play other soul chargers such as like Zenkai that came in the deck set too, or different ones like Hage Chika and even the Whipposaurus as well. It's really up to you, especially if you couldn't get a hold of these. These also have went up in price, unfortunately, because of the demand again. The reason that I still play this is because of the deck thinning aspect. And I want to re-emphasize because we have to make do with what we have because the promo Shiranui has not been released yet in the English. So if people are watching like, why are you not playing that card? Well, we don't have it. So we got to make do at this point. We're playing 3 Stealth PGs and 1 Sanctitude. And so again, the Stealth PGs can be searched with Aiza, which is super appreciated because it's a card that you would rather have in hand because it's a PG. You need it in hand. You can't just call it a rearguard and woohoo, right? But we also want to make room for Sanctitude because it's a great card against like the Stride deck sets because everybody is basically a grade 4 for the most part and this becomes a 1 card PG. You're technically going to be a grade 3 during those turns because you have a grade 3 Vanguard and it becomes the heart of a Stride. So you don't have that issue that other decks such as like Pure Light or Magnolia Elder from those grade 4 forms that stay on the Vanguard circle so you can't use Sanctitude. But this is a deck, especially with the Stride deck sets, you can take advantage of Sanctitude and really get the best for your buck, essentially. 2 copies of Doggo, so I felt like comfortable just playing 2. You could play a little bit more, but like I already have enough grade 3s / grade 4s in my lineup that I feel comfortable with striding. For time to time, I use this as the stride cost, but it also has the other fact that as long as you have the crest, you can discard it and search for a copy of a Boro, essentially. This is super helpful because if you want to guarantee a Makuro stride the following turn, then you can use this immediately to add it to your hand so that way you're guaranteed to make sure that you have it for the following turn to pay cost of stride at that point too. So just having 2 copies kind of makes room where you don't have to play the 4 copies of a Boro in total as well. So that way you can make room for other stuff as well. With the triggers, we want to play 4 effect crit triggers because this is the card that actually goes into Soul to give something plus 2k, but the plus 2k really doesn't matter. It's really just that it goes into Soul. So whenever you do need to use this card for that same turn to be able to restand like a Furai or a Seikai or even Asperidia, this card comes in clutch. What essentially you can do is boost the restander first with this card and then it goes into Soul, and then when your Vanguard attacks, the timing is perfect because it's already in the Soul and you can Soul Blast it out and boom. In addition to that, we are playing 4 more crit for a total of 8 crit. You want to have that crit pressure, especially with the deck thinning aspect of it. It's very scary just taking a Vanguard attack. And of course, when you do Makuro, the additional drive checks can see crits and put those onto your restanders to get twice the benefit. So depending on what you want to play, you can play the draws or the fronts. So I went with the draws because I see this deck as a combo piece type of deck, so you need to see your pieces. This is another way to survive the early game as well. So not only you're getting a +1, you get to +1 essentially in your drive checks or even your damage checks because you're going to take damage in the early game, especially against decks that are very aggressive at that point too, that just want to finish you off before you get a chance to stride too. So that helps with those games when it does come up essentially. Also, what's cool, if you do a Makuro turn, you can draw into more combo pieces potentially while getting those drive checks benefits too. You never know, you get to draw 1 and then that gets you the other restander that you may be missing. The Dragon Empire OT. So like I said, this restands your Vanguard, but because of that, your rearguards are now once per turn, so they could also restand once they see your Vanguard attack once more. So this card just is phenomenal for Dragon Empire, especially with Nubatama. Definitely recommend playing this. 4 heals, so it's totally up to you what you want to play. Some people are playing the ones that get shield if your opponent's Vanguard's higher, or there's a crit or a restander, you know. Depending on your metagame and what you expect, just adjust the ratios that you want to adjust. Also, since I got the premium deck set, this is what the premium version of the crest looks like. It has the nice red silver look, and it also has the SP foiling as well. Onto the strides, there's not much to talk about. You want to play max copies of Magen Tenbu. This is phenomenal. This is your first stride. This flips cards during the main phase, so it takes advantage of the crest power up for all of your units once you go into your battle phase too. This can continually keep flipping cards face up for you too as well, so later on, if you can't go into Makuro, you can still fall back into Magen Tenbu. This also helps retire the unit that you dominate too, so you can also play around what you want to revive with a Boro later on, and then this can get rid of units that might be pesky at that point. And then 4 copies of Makuro, pretty self-explanatory. You dominate a rearguard, you dominate their vanguards. You see drive checks is such a powerful stride to be able to finish, especially if you're expecting to see triggers to really make your turn even more scarier as well. Also, quick plug, if you want to have more one-on-one coaching or can help you with this deck or specifically just with the formats itself, happy to help out. Feel free to check out my Metafy page and the testimonials and book a session. Happy to help out where I can. Showing off a ride progression and also some stride play. On your grade 2 turn, you ride the Shoujo Doji. Your top 5 can reveal something like this. Key cards are Aiza and Tenrei. In this example, I'm going to use Aiza. Aiza's skill, Counterblast 1. Check 5 for stealth unit. You can add the grade 2. And if you want, you can call it too. So you can attack depending on the attack pattern that you want. And also the Vanguard will do the drive checks. You got a crit. Again, we're deck thinning. Goes back to your turn. If you're fighting for first stride or you're fighting an early game and they give you another CB, you can still take advantage and stay in grade 2 again. You can call cards like Tenrei, Counterblast 1, draw a card, and you can still call bodies such as another grade 2. Attack accordingly, drive checks, call them. They attack some of your riggers, they give you damage, you go back to you, and you go into your grade 3 and pitch the cost of stride onto Magen Tembu. On stride dominate, Magen Tembu, Counterblast 1, flips something. You restanders, or you can use Forbidal to get Esperidia, and then of course the peeling. Esperidia can go into hand, but you can call it immediately. Retire something, get +5, and your crest gives you a +5 entirely as well. 18, 23, Vanguard swing, restand, drive checks, 1, 2, 3, power here. Attack boosted. Let's say they get rid of your regards, you take some damage, you stride with Makuro right here. Call restander, then do Makuro skill. Twin drive usually. If you have any triggers, stack them on 2 here. In this case, I heal. Call another restander. At this point, you see 3 dominated attacks, 2 regards and 1 Vanguard. So these are +15s, and then plus 10k additional with the crest. So 35, 35 on attack, Soul Blast 2, restand, drive checks, stack on 2. Oh, wow. Wasn't expecting that. But yeah, if you had any other Soul, this would come up a lot more. And then of course any... Oh, you have a crit, so it doesn't matter because we don't have the Soul right now, but if you did have Soul, definitely stack the crit onto another restander, essentially. You can attack this way, and since we don't have Soul, we might as well just stack, and boom. And that's the deck profile, amigos. I hope you enjoyed it too. It's pretty updated at this point too. I know I did one back in like December, November time once we got the full reveals of the deck set too. Things have changed over time. Yes, we've seen the metagame in Japan pan out as well, but we also had to make do with some choices, as I mentioned too. A couple things to think about moving forward. Eventually, we're going to get the energy mechanic as well. So basically for what this deck does, it's really just drawing a card whenever you have the energy cost for it. I would definitely recommend just keeping an eye out for cards that are generic that could potentially help this deck in different ways using the energy mechanic, but that might be more down the line essentially. The other card to watch out is Bracing Angel Ladder, like I mentioned before too. This card is going to be kind of annoying to deal with. Of course, like the decks that you're facing have to see the card as well, so it's not always going to come up, but when it does come up, just be prepared to do so. And also think about cards that work around domination, or maybe just as you keep advantage in your turns, just make sure that you have something to fall back to just in case that comes up, essentially. Other than that, the deck is really solid, and so I've been having a lot of fun with this deck too in the standard format. Facing it may not be as exciting for people, but like me playing this, I actually do enjoy it. It's nostalgic, but it's also something that is refreshing too at the same time. So I definitely recommend for players to like play out this deck, get a feel for it, and see what you like, and also tweak to your preference at that point too. If you want to support the channel, use the affiliate links mentioned, like 50 Card Shop, Trading Card Mint, TCG Player, Card Trader Zero. Also, if you want to increase your anime swag, check out Dueling Guards, deck boxes, playmats, and binders as well. I actually just recently got the Naruto Sage mode, and it's phenomenal. You can check that out on a YouTube short that I did too as well, if you want to like basically see like a deck box opening too. Let me know your thoughts too. What cards you're playing, what do you have to do to make do, because some of the cards are hard to get. Love to chat with the community and love to hear feedback. On to the next one, amigos. Bye!